Hi, I'm Terri Donofrio, and I'm an associate professor of communication studies in the rhetoric department at Coe College. And I was an Obermann Fellow in residence during spring term 2021. And I get the pleasure of talking a little bit about what the experience was like during a highly unusual time. So, although I was in residence during that time, of course, what in residence meant was redefined by the fact that physical space had been upended by the pandemic itself. So, in residence was a way to create a sense of an intellectual community in virtual space. And I think for multiple reasons that became incredibly important during the semester that I was in residence, in part because this was my very first experience of sabbatical. And I've heard many people talk about the kind of isolating nature of sabbatical itself when you are out of the rhythm of the semester and you are doing your own work on its own pace, and that can feel somewhat disconnected from the colleagues that you're normally in close conversation and contact with. And of course, that feeling of disconnection then was amplified by the social distancing that was also part of life that semester too. And so for both of those reasons, having a community that existed in virtual space that brought people who were on the same rhythm because they were all doing this kind of self-driven and independent work during this time of profound isolation became extra important. And so I really found myself grateful to have a group of individuals who are all pursuing their intellectual work on their own time, but converging with one another to ask questions from the space of intellectual curiosity that comes from being in different disciplines. And I showed up for my fellowship in residence with plans that I had made and thought that I was going to continue working on because they had been my intellectual trajectory. I had written my proposal confident that I was going to commit my time and energy to a program of study that I had already invested years of work and research into. But for a variety of different reasons, showing up in January of 2021 and putting my head down just to work on that project felt disingenuous to what was going on in the larger world around me as this fellowship experience was unfolding. So I came to the fellowship with some critical questions about what am I using my intellectual energy for? What are the best ways to use my energy? What is the value of this body of knowledge? What audiences am I choosing to privilege in my work? Pretty fundamental questions and foundational questions about the value of scholarly contributions. And in some ways, that was a pretty scary place to start a fellowship, is to show up in a position of uncertainty, saying, this is the body of knowledge I think I'm going to pursue, but I'm entertaining some pretty critical questions about intellectual work and these particular modes of inquiry. And I could not have imagined a more supportive place to ask those questions. Pretty quickly, I realized that this would be a welcome and, in fact, in line with the mission of what the Obermann Center does, to ask these questions about the value of knowledge and the work that intellectual work does in the world. So when it was my turn to present my work, I felt empowered by the way the environment had been set up to come to the group with foundational questions. Instead of presenting a polished piece of work, I did something I don't usually do, which is I broke my work down to show its seams and to problematize with other people things that I didn't think were working about the project. And as a byproduct of that experience, it shifted the trajectory of my time in residence in ways that allowed me to ask larger questions and do some fundamental exploration about the kinds of writing I wanted to do and the kinds of questions I wanted to take up in this particular moment and at this particular time.